podcasting can be extremely lucrative, but you need the downloads. You can grow your podcast if you have a budget. It's just like any other platform. If you put paid ads against it, it's going to grow. And then once you grow, you're going to get asked to get on bigger shows. And it's like this flywheel effect.
Hey guys, this is another episode of the podcast. Today I'm here with Hala. How I discovered Hala was I've been going really hard on LinkedIn, and I was introduced to Hala through a mutual friend, through Steve. And I've just been following all her content. She's been killing it on LinkedIn. She does so well. And I then went into like a rabbit hole, found out about her podcast, started watching all her different episodes and her clips. And yeah, I just went into this massive rabbit hole, and I'm so appreciative of your time. And then I asked if you were available to come into my show, and you said yes. So welcome to the show, Hala. Please share with everyone a small intro about who you are and what you do.
Thank you so much, Andy. And Steve is a great friend, so I'm happy that he introduced us. So my name is Hala. I'm the host of Young and Profiting Podcast. I'm also the CEO and founder of YAP Media, which is a full-service social media and podcast agency. And I'm also the founder of the YAP Media Podcast Network, which grows and monetizes podcast shows in the business category.
That is awesome. Did you start the podcast and that business at the same time, or did that business come afterwards?
No, this is such a great question. So I actually started Young and Profiting Podcast as a side hustle. I started my career in radio, so I did have radio background, and then I had a website, then I went into corporate marketing, and so I had a very unique kind of 20-year-old life, through my 20s. I had very unique experiences, like I mentioned, working at the radio station, owning a blog site, being a young entrepreneur, and then I hit a lot of failures and obstacles, and it triggered me to decide that I was just going to be a normal person, get a corporate job, that I wasn't going to make it in entertainment. And I went into corporate marketing, and I did really well, but I was unfulfilled because I wasn't following my dreams and my true purpose in life, which is to be a voice for my generation, a positive voice for my generation. That was always my kind of shining star that I was aiming towards. And I remember being in corporate marketing, working at Hewlett Packard for about 4 years, not getting an opportunity that I wanted. I was making my first 6 figures. I was doing pretty well, but I didn't get this opportunity, and then it triggered me to go back to my dreams. At the time, I was listening to about an audiobook a week and really figuring out myself and working on my self-improvement and kind of enhancing my skills. And I got this confidence again that, hey, maybe I can give it another shot. I've got more experience. I'll do a little different spin. I'll do a show about business and use all my contacts and all my skills. And so I did Young and Profiting Podcast as a side hustle. And I started my LinkedIn journey on the day one that I launched my podcast. And I ended up becoming a LinkedIn influencer before my podcast blew up. And I leveraged LinkedIn to blow up my podcast. And then 2 years into it, I ended up starting my agency because the guests that would come on my show, Andy, they'd always end with the same question over and over again. And I had big guests from the start, huge authors, celebrities. And they'd be like, Hala, how did you blow up on LinkedIn? Could you do this for me? Do you have a team? At the time, I had a team of intern and volunteers. So I'd be like, no, I don't have a team. They can only help me. They work for free, And little did I know that was the start of my agency. And so many people asked that one day I was actually working at Disney at the time, and I was unhappy in my job. So I was starting to be aware of the opportunities around me. So one day somebody asked me, and I said, you know what, I'll give it a shot. We'll do your videos, right? Everybody wanted our cool videos. And then one thing just led to another. And I ended up landing big client after big client. And fast forward to today, 2 years later, $5 million in revenue, over 60 employees all over the world, managing huge accounts across their LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, podcasts. And now I launched a podcast network, and just things kind of skyrocketed after that because I followed the demand.
Recently, over the last 2-3 years, that has been become a really popular thing where people would create creative agencies where they help you create TikTok content, LinkedIn content. They sort of automate it all for you. How have you guys stood out from all of that? And is that still a problem that needs to be solved at the moment?
Yeah. So basically, the way that I stood out is that I was very specific about my clients. We're very white glove, high ticket services. and it's almost exclusive to work with us. So we're a boutique agency. I only take 20 social and podcast clients at a time. We'll never do more than that. And that's on purpose because an agency model is actually not scalable. I don't want to do this forever, and I only want to do it for really high caliber people that are going to improve my network, improve my brand equity, all those kinds of things. There's other parts of the business that are basically unlimited scalability. And so the agency, in terms of your original question, which is how do we differentiate, it's through our end-to-end super white glove services where a CEO or a celebrity literally has to do nothing. We have ghostwriters on their behalf. We publish the content on their behalf. We manage the comments and the DMs, and we have automation services, and just literally every little possible thing is done for you, where most agencies are like, we can do your videos, or, we might do end to end, but we don't really perform. We don't know how to do publishing and engagement strategies. We do everything. And obviously you see what I do on LinkedIn, we crush, right? So we actually have guarantees in terms of our performance as well.
Has the main goal of all your different sort of social media platforms to then sort of funnel traffic to your podcast, and has that done really well, sort of converting and moving people from LinkedIn over to listening to your show?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain tactics that are more effective for driving people from social to your podcast. Traditionally, that's really hard to do. That's why there's lots of celebrities that have podcasts that are really small, because it's very hard to bring people from social to podcast, because most people who are on the web, who are looking at your social media, actually do not listen to podcasts frequently. They might listen to a podcast every other month, but they're not avid podcast listeners that are listening week over week. Those types of listeners need to be targeted in the podcast players themselves. So the number one way to grow your podcast is to be visible in the podcast players. So whether that's through ads, whether that's through guesting on other podcasts like I am doing with you, or putting commercials on other podcasts. But there are ways to increase the chances that people are going to actually go listen to your podcast from social media. So for me, the real secret is the DMs, right? We can put micro content on all day on our feeds. And if we don't actually retarget the people who engage in the DMs and give them the link, chances are that most people that see that post, even if it was 100,000 people, like 2 people are going to go listen to the podcast. It's literally that low. But if we DM the 700 people who engaged, more than half of them are going to go listen to the show. And so that's what we always do. We retarget anybody who likes or comments on our posts with the link to go listen to our show. And that's what we do for our clients, no matter what their initiative is. So if they have a book and we write a post about their book, anybody who engages, we then DM and give them the link to the book. That's a strategy you can use across the board, no matter what kind of a business you have.
That is so freaking smart, because you're right. Like, people don't, like, it's sort of like retargeting, but for free organically. It's genius. And do you do that just on LinkedIn or on all platforms? Like,
it's just a rule that you can apply to literally anything. It's called permission-based marketing, right? If somebody engages on your post, even if they look at your story on Instagram, right? They're raising their hand and saying, hey, I'm interested in your content. And now you have a point of relevancy to reach out to them, where they're never going to be like, why did you spam me? I didn't ask for this. I've never gotten any negative feedback doing this, because the approach is you took the first action. Now I'm going to give you something helpful for free. So for example, you liked my recent micro content about my podcast. I'd love to give you the full link to my episode. Or you just commented about my post about entrepreneurship. I'd love to give you my free guide of how I can help you launch your first business. Here's the link. So you always want to give something for free. You don't want to like outwardly sell to someone, right? So give them something free of value, but that takes them into your funnel. And the real key is having a point of relevancy. And in this case, we're saying you engaged on my post, but it could be so many different things. So Andy, you have me on your show, right? Now you can go on my LinkedIn and see who liked and commented on my recent posts and be like, hey, I noticed that you engaged on Hala's post. I just had her on my show. This is another way that you can do this, where there's a point of relevancy and no one's ever going to be mad about that, because they're going to be like, oh, he's got a point. There's a reason to reach out to me. He didn't just randomly find me, right? And so Steve is the same example. He's huge on LinkedIn too. You can now retarget his followers and bring them into your network that way.
That is so freaking smart, Hala. How did you figure this out? This is so insane. Like my mind is blown right now because it's so relevant what you're doing. Like it's so contextual and there's just a huge conversion rate because you're sort of really picking and choosing who you target and it's sort of scalable, which is like, I'm just like mind blown right now.
It is, because there's lots of automation services that will help you do this at scale. So the reason how I found out is that's actually how I ended up first growing on LinkedIn. I remember Gary Vee was crushing it on the platform. At the time, he was like the biggest podcaster on the platform. He had a marketing agency. I was in marketing. And I thought, hey, anybody who likes his content is going to like mine too. Then I also was very savvy in social media, and I knew that engagement rate is highly reflective of who's following you, right? And so on LinkedIn, a lot of people go on that site, they go look for a job, you connect with them, and then they never come back on that platform. So they're never going to engage on your post. So you keep spitting out content to a dead following. And I realized that I thought that a lot of my following that I had was from like the previous 5 years, and I never posted on LinkedIn. I wasn't active. And I was like, all my following is dead. I need to bring in active followers into my network in order to increase my engagement rate so I can eventually go viral, because otherwise I'll never go viral. And so I decided that I was going to target people who are active on LinkedIn. So that meant people who liked and comment on influencers' recent posts. And I used Gary Vee as my first test. And I remember I did it manually. I didn't know you could automate this. By the way, you're not supposed, like, I would not advise you to do any automation unless you really know what you're doing, because you can do this. I did it with my hands for like a year and I did really well just doing it manually. And I remember I would invite anybody who, like the people that I saw that liked and commented on Gary Vee's post, and I'd be like, hey, what's up? My name is Hala. I noticed you liked Gary Vee's content and podcasts. If you like his stuff, you're going to like mine too. I'd love to connect. That was the first message. 9 out of 10 people would accept. Before I knew it, I had 10,000 of Gary Vee's fans in my community who were all active on LinkedIn promoting my stuff. Nobody had ever done anything like this before. I'd comment on Gary Vee's post. I'd be the top comment with 200 likes no matter what I said, because I had all his fans in my network. And then I just did it with Tony Robbins. I did it with Lewis Howes. I just kept doing it. And then all of a sudden I was bigger than all those guys, you know, like Gary Vee is still bigger than me on LinkedIn, but I'm the biggest podcaster on LinkedIn now. And that was one of my strategies. The other thing that I did that I think you might find interesting, Andy, is that I used my networking skills. And I remember I scoured LinkedIn for every single up and coming podcaster on the platform, anybody who was making any sort of noise and doing a good job. And I invited them to a WhatsApp group. And I said, hey guys, like, I see you're trying to do it on LinkedIn. I'm trying to figure this out too. Let's join forces. Let's support each other's links. Let's have a mastermind and teach each other tricks. And then all of a sudden I became the glue that put all these podcasters together. And then once Clubhouse came out, we all started doing rooms together and got even closer. And then everything just kept skyrocketing, and you just expand your network so much when you take this collaboration over competition approach. So I did multiple things that kind of led to me, I think, becoming the biggest podcaster on the platform right now.
That is so cool, Hala. Is LinkedIn now still the main platform that you and your team focus on, or is there a platform that you guys have been tripling down on as of the last, say, 3 to 4 months?
We are going gung-ho on YouTube. So YouTube is really where I'm focused. We've grown a lot on YouTube. I have 13,000 subscribers, which isn't a ton considering that I have like 500,000 subscribers on my audio podcast. So it's like, it's still really small, but it's so rewarding because it's growing so fast. We're getting 20,000 or so views per video. We're starting to monetize YouTube. And I see it as something that is going to be able to scale really well and open up this whole new audience that we never had before that enjoys watching podcasts on YouTube. And it should be really lucrative too. So I'm really excited about YouTube. Also, like Instagram, we're a lot more focused on Reels, and TikTok, of course, we're really trying to, you know, increase our brand equity. But here's the thing. Sometimes it's not smart to go too wide, and it's better to go deep. And so I'm quite happy being the biggest podcaster on LinkedIn. It gives me a lot of leverage. And I'm actually really happy that when I started, I wasn't, darting from app to app. In fact, when I started my podcast, because it was just me, and then eventually, I didn't tell you this story, but I had volunteers since episode 2. By episode 10, I had 10 volunteers in a Slack channel who were super fans just helping me on my show. And we didn't have the bandwidth to attack every single platform. All I did was focus on LinkedIn. And then I became the biggest podcaster on LinkedIn. And let's say a year and a half into it, I had 60,000 followers on LinkedIn, which at the time was a lot. And I was able to go to all the apps. And at the time, my podcast was big, but it wasn't huge, right? It was nowhere near the size of what I am now. I was getting like 5,000 downloads a month. But at the same time, I was the biggest podcast influencer, bigger than Lewis Howes, bigger than Jay Shetty on LinkedIn. So that gave me leverage, right? And then I was able to go to Castbox and Player FM and Podbean and Riverside.fm and Good Pods and Goodreads and all these apps and be like, hey, nice to meet you. My name's Hala. I'm the biggest podcaster on LinkedIn. If you promote me in your blog, if you promote me in your app, I'll write a post about you in exchange for doing that. And so I started doing all this cross promo. It's called trading audiences. And then I skyrocketed and I became, my downloads went from 5,000 a month to 10,000 a day to way more than that. I got on the cover of Podcast Magazine. I landed an interview with Matthew McConaughey, and then it was like game over, And it was all because I leveraged what I had. But had I focused on Instagram and all these other shiny objects and not just LinkedIn, then I wouldn't have ever been able to leverage that to grow my podcast. And now I'm leveraging all of that to grow YouTube and so on, But still to this day, I don't like to spread myself too thin. I'd rather really focus on YouTube and dominate that and then move on to the next thing. TikTok, I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm dropping the ball because you do want to capitalize on platforms with organic growth. So it's like if you were to start from scratch today, I'd say the 2 platforms to try is TikTok and LinkedIn because they're still the 2 with the most organic traction. YouTube, you really got to know what you're doing, and it's very expensive to run. So you want to go the path of least resistance when you're just starting out. And right now, that's still LinkedIn and TikTok.
Interesting. So let's say in the next 6 months, I wanted to go really hard on a social platform. Let's say I was picking TikTok or LinkedIn. And I know, let's say in the next 6 months, I can get my LinkedIn from say 5,000 to 35,000. But whereas my TikTok, I can get it from maybe 90,000 to maybe 250K followers. Which one would be stronger of a leverage? With a LinkedIn account that has 35,000 followers, 50,000, 60,000, do people recognize how that is a lot for LinkedIn? Is that a thing people know?
Yeah, I think business brands, they value LinkedIn followers in a different way because first of all, people on LinkedIn are typically professional. They're typically making a lot more money. They're college educated, where TikTok is going to be like Gen Z or younger, and they don't have a lot of money and they don't have a lot of purchasing power. Plus, there's lots of bots on both TikTok and Instagram. LinkedIn is a lot more secure. Literally, right now I have 100 and almost 80,000 followers. They're all real people. You know what I mean? 100%. On Instagram, I have almost $180,000, but I would never dare say they're all real people because it's so weird. Bots will follow you even if you don't want them, right? I'm sure all of us have experienced that. There's no such thing as bots on LinkedIn. So I think the quality of audience is one thing, but in terms of where you should spend your time, it really depends where your audience is hanging out. So you always want to be where your audience is hanging out. And the other thing you need to keep in mind is you always want to be where you can stand out. So one of the reasons why I did so well on LinkedIn is because nobody else, or very few people, I should say, were talking about podcasts. And in fact, when I started, people were getting mad at me. Why aren't you this is a HR platform. Don't talk about motivation. I used to get a lot of crap and I was like, what are you guys, free country? What do you mean? And actually me talking about things that nobody else talked about on LinkedIn was to my advantage. So you have to think of both things. Is your audience there and will I stand out with this content? TikTok doesn't need another dancer, but maybe there's something that you do that might stand out on TikTok, right? And it will give you an angle and if your audience is there, why not? But you got to be careful because some people, want to start a TikTok, but their audience isn't there. What's the point of doing that? That's going to waste a lot of your time and resources.
What do you think is the white space in LinkedIn at the moment? Like recently, I've been over the last few months, I've been trying a bit of everything, like photos, long form posts, short form posts. I've been reposting a lot of my TikToks. That seems to be working because I think people aren't really putting horizontal sort of TikTok content. So maybe I double down on that. But do you see a white space on LinkedIn when it comes to content at the moment?
Yeah. So the big trends on LinkedIn is graphics are doing the best right now. The bigger, the brighter, the better. So I call them poster size. If you go on my page, you'll see that every graphic that we post is it's not a square. It's vertical, not quite story size, a little fatter than a story graphic. But I call it poster size 4x5. And those graphics work really well. And the more that you can make it look authentic, organic, meaning no logo, don't make it super templated, lifestyle type photography, that works really well on LinkedIn because so many people are posting like articles and this and that, and it gets like mundane. And then when you see a person who looks like it's like they're part of their life and they look relatable, people engage on that. Okay. So lifestyle, big photos work really well on LinkedIn. I noticed that women do really well on LinkedIn than men, especially like more attractive women. I think that goes for every platform. One of the things that you also want to pay attention to on LinkedIn and any social media platform is be careful with how you post your content. So for example, I'll give you a couple of things that don't work on LinkedIn. If you link to an outside site, your post is going to be deprioritized because apps want you to stay on their app. They don't want you to go to another app. So if you link to a third-party app, your post is going to be deprioritized and less visible to your following because that app doesn't want people to leave their app. So if you do have something to promote, instead do something educational related to what you want to sell and then DM the people who engage with the actual link that you want to send them to, or put the link in the comments. So that's what I would suggest in terms of like if you have to drive people somewhere. And by the way, salesy posts do bad on any social media platform anyway. So it's not to your advantage to do that anyway. The other thing is like on LinkedIn, a lot of people think they should just like tag all the influencers that they know in their post. In fact, that's the worst thing you can do. If people don't engage on your post, even if it's just one person that you tag, and if they don't engage on your post, LinkedIn is going to consider that spam. And they're going to think that you're spamming people, so they'll deprioritize your post too. So I don't even tag the guests on my show because they're so famous. It's highly unlikely they're going to see my post, and even though I am a big show, that they're going to comment on it. So unless they say they will or they have a team that we're in contact with, we don't even tag the guests. We just write it out. We might tag them in the comments or shoot them a DM, hey, we posted this, but we're not actually tagging people in the caption. And this type of like thinking you can take across every platform because any smart app, they're run by like really smart product people. They want to keep people on their app, right? They want to manage for spam and things like that. So you've got to pay attention to those things. Also the way that you write, okay? A lot of people do big chunky paragraphs, one big blurb of text. You want to shy away from that on social media. People are looking at mobile and they want to see line by line content. So like 7 to 10 words per line. It's called Browetry. That's how you want to write, especially on LinkedIn. So if you guys look at any of my posts on LinkedIn, it's this line by line style because it's easy to digest. It's kind of like a poem that you read, and it also forces you to be really concise and get your point across. So those are my top tips in terms of how to dominate that platform.
Is there like a sweet spot on how often you should be posting on LinkedIn? Have you ever, like, what happens when you push it more than once a day? So I've noticed all the top people, like I used to post multiple times a day and I just made it just down to one since I saw everyone else do just one. I was like, I'm not going to try do something different. If everyone's doing one a post a day, there's a reason for that.
100%. So your posts can cannibalize each other. So it's different than like YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, where each asset, especially on like Instagram Reels, for example, or YouTube videos or TikTok videos, they kind of operate as if they were like a website. And it's like each thing gets a chance to go viral. On LinkedIn, the posts cannibalize each other. So if you have a post that's getting a lot of traction, the worst thing you can do is post again. You want to let that post die almost until you post again. So my team, it's like if something gets, like every client has their different threshold, but like for me, if one of my posts is getting 2,000, it's like ends the day and it's like 5,000 likes, everybody knows there's no post tomorrow. We're going to let that one go viral, right? And if we posted tomorrow, that 5,000 post would just stop at like 5,500, 6,000. If we didn't post, it might hit 10, 12, 15,000. And we'll get a lot of views, and that equals a lot of followers. And so, for example, you know, some of my clients will get a post with over 100,000 likes, right? Millions of views. They might gain 20 to 30,000 followers from that one post, which is like 4 months of work, right? So it's like we don't want to let that viral post die. We'll do everything in our power to keep it alive. And there's lots of tricks to keep it alive and make it go as viral as it can.
What are some tricks to keep it alive?
I knew you were going to ask. I was like, I don't know if I want to tell you those tricks. No, I'll tell your listeners those tricks. So one of the things that you can do to keep it alive is, first of all, you never want the comment section to look like the conversation is over. So what do I mean by that? My team is not allowed to respond to every single comment. Something psychologically that if you respond to every single comment, people look at that and they think the conversation is over. I don't know what it is. And so we respond to half the comments and people keep commenting. And they also get shy to see if, even though it might not be, at this point, it's obviously not me responding to every single comment. I have so many fans, you know? So my team is doing it. They also get shy if they feel like I'm like responding to every comment. Like it's like a lot of pressure. And so like you can't make it seem like the conversation is over. That's number one. Number two is virality is all about shares on LinkedIn. The more shares, the more viral you're going to go. It's not about comments. It's not about likes. It's about shares. So you always want to think shareable content. What is shareable content? Inspirational or motivational, interactive, or educational. That is shareable content. So first of all, you want to make sure your content is shareable. So that also means nobody's going to share your promotional post, you know, at least if you're new, right? I can do a salesy post and people still share it because I have very avid fans. But when you're just starting out, no one is going to share your promotional post. So whatever you do has to be relatable where other people want to share. And the most valuable engagement on LinkedIn is a share with a caption. So if you can get people to share something with a caption, it has a high chance of going viral. So one of the things that I came up with that turned out to be a huge trend on LinkedIn, and I was the one that came up with it, was I started doing graphics that had a picture of me or not with a tweet. So it would be like a tweet looking graphic with no caption. And it would be a tweet with a quote that I know people love, that went viral in the past, and we used it in a different way. And I know people love the quote. What would happen is that because I didn't have a caption, people would write their own caption, and then they would go massively viral. So I started this trend like a year ago, and the first, 100 times we did it, like clockwork, viral, like clockwork. Now it's like a lot of people copycatted us. But it was just like, that's like just one example of being creative. So always remember that a share with a caption is going to go really viral on LinkedIn. And by the way, if anybody's really interested in this stuff, I'm actually launching a LinkedIn Masterclass soon. I'm super excited about it. It's launching later in October. I've been asked to do this for so long. And honestly, I'm in the LinkedIn influencer program, and I'm often teaching people at LinkedIn how to use LinkedIn. Like I'm more knowledgeable than the people who work there. So it's a 2-day workshop, half day. And you guys basically get the same training that I teach my team. And it's going to be really exciting. It's the first time I've ever done anything like this. I always give my value for free. I used to run Clubhouse rooms for hours every week, giving free value. And everybody would ask me for this. And I never had time. And I finally have time to do this. So I'm very excited.
That is so freaking cool, Hala. Everyone has to check it out. We'll link in the description. We'll get your team to send us all the different resources that everyone can check out. Another thing I've seen on LinkedIn, everyone likes to repost these viral clips. And that seems to do well. They'll get some viral clip from somewhere else and they repost it versus content like yours and Steve, where like every piece of content you guys are in it, your faces in it, you guys are talking. The first approach seems to be much, much more easier to go viral because you get some clip of some bear helping out a deer and all of a sudden it just goes viral. But then people don't know who you are. But then the content of you and yourself, that is just really hard to go viral, I guess. Any tips there? Because I've been really focused on creating content around me, but I haven't had a viral piece of content yet.
Yeah. So it is definitely possible to have a viral piece of content when it's you focused, right? The thing is, like, what are you doing to make it go viral? Like I said, is it inspirational? Is it motivational? Are you telling a story? Are people feeling like they're related to you, like they feel for you? Did they get an emotion out of your post? Did they feel like more inspired after your post? Did they get educated about something that they were interested in, right? Are you bringing in the right people in your network who's actually going to like your content? Are you being proactive about bringing in, like we said, targeting lookalike profiles and bringing in their audience into your network? Are you doing all those things, right? Without the perfect storm, it's never going to happen, right? So you need to make sure you're doing all the right things. Now, to your point, these viral videos, they're good to implement in your strategy here and there to like get that big boost. But what you're not doing is getting a targeted following. So if you have a product or a service that's good for anyone, no matter if they're in India, no matter if they're, can afford you or not, or a certain title or not, then yeah, use viral videos in your strategy because they're shareable, because usually they're inspirational, motivational. You're taking them from other platforms. They've done well. They'll probably do well on here. But like you said, no one's going to associate you with that video. They're just going to be sharing the video. They're not going to remember your name. They're not going to remember your expertise. You're not going to be a thought leader. It's not going to grow your brand equity that much because even brands that may want to work with you, they're going to look at your page and be like, oh, like they're taking the shortcut, cheap route. They're just reposting viral videos. We see all those types of influencers, and honestly, nobody would consider them to be influencers. They're just people who post viral videos. Now, you can still post viral videos in between your other strategy to kind of give things a boost and see how that helps with traction, because one thing to realize on LinkedIn is that your performance matters over time. So what I mean by this is that the algorithm looks at your content for the last 2 weeks, and your stuff will go viral based on the engagement of your previous posts. So that's why you can't post so much on LinkedIn, because things cannibalize each other. Whereas on Instagram, you can post one reel, it might suck, the next one might go viral, the next one would suck, the next one would go viral. On LinkedIn, it's very much, if you have a post that sucks, it's going to take you a long time to go viral again. So much so that I delete posts that don't get a certain amount of likes. If I get a post that has under 500 likes, I'm deleting that. And but everybody has a different threshold. So for somebody who's not like a big influencer, 500 likes is a lot. For me, I'm like, oh, that did terrible. I'm deleting that because it's going to prevent me from going viral again.
So many golden nuggets. Like, this is
oh my God, so many. You guys are getting a crash course.
This is insane. Talk about podcasting for a second. Tell me about your podcast. How have you been getting guests at the moment, and what's that journey been like? That's something I'm really curious about as well.
Oh, this is a big topic. Okay, so how have I been getting guests now? I have a guest outreach team, but it's the same principles as social media. You want to stand out and you want to show your social proof. When I first started podcasting, I was sort of lucky because I was in the podcast market before it got super saturated. So like once COVID hit, everybody started having a podcast. When I had a podcast, it was like old white guys had a podcast, not like young girls that like could be like, going out clubbing. And instead I had this like educational podcast. So like a lot of people with me. I'm sorry for cursing, but like, a lot of the people that I asked to come on my podcast, like they really were into it and they believed in me and they thought I was like smart and scrappy. And I reached out to them on platforms specifically LinkedIn, that nobody else was reaching out to them to. So a lot of people might have targeted them on email. I would connect with them with a LinkedIn invite. Like, so for example, I got Robert Greene this way. I got Chris Voss this way. I got Stephen Kotler this way. And I would just shoot them an invite. Hey, what's up? My name is Hala. I'm the biggest podcaster on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect. Or my name is Hala. I just launched a podcast or whatever. I'm a top 10 how-to podcast, whatever my accolade was at the moment. And I would say, would love to connect. If you're interested to come on the show, then they'd connect. And then I would, start the conversation to get them to come on my show. So the key here is that now everyone is doing that. So even now, I'm like one of the biggest podcasters in the world. Literally last week, I was number 76 in the world out of all podcasts. People don't respond to me on LinkedIn because their DMs are just saturated. It's not the same. But maybe they're responding on Twitter because Twitter is sort of dying and maybe fans aren't reaching out to them on Twitter. So maybe there's another way for you to reach out to them, some other social platform that they're on. Maybe their Instagram's not that big or whatever it is. Probably not. But maybe there's another way to reach out to them. Okay. So think of creative ways to reach out to people. The other thing is like putting this social proof right there. So I'll tell you the story about how I got Matthew McConaughey. I took a screenshot of my stats. So you can, if you're a podcaster, you can get your stats on Chartable. And at the time, I had gotten the cover of Podcast Magazine and I was number 1 in education across all apps. So Matthew McConaughey was promoting green lights and he was going on the Oprah show. He was going on like Tim Ferriss, like all these huge shows, way bigger than mine. But I was having a moment. And so I was like, let me take screenshots of all this stuff. And I noticed that he went on some podcaster who's like much smaller than my show. And I was like, hey, Matt, and his team, I was like, hey, Matt and team, I noticed that you're going on podcasts much smaller than mine. I'd love for you to come on Young and Profiting Podcast. That's it. And then I took screenshots and I attached my Podcast Magazine thing and they're like, yeah, let's do it. Just so simple, sometimes simple like commands authority. And so I do this all the time. Like anytime I hit like a big number on my ranking, I take a screenshot and I'm like, who's on, like, I got Ed Milet that way. Like, hey, Ed, we're like back to back on this thing, like come on my show. And it's like a no brainer for them because they're like, hey, she's got the social proof, right? People want the proof. So the other thing is if you don't have those, I'm very conscious that like I'm at a different level now than most podcasters, but I did start from zero and not that long ago, 4.5 years ago, right? I started from zero. I talked about my previous experiences. So I remember emailing like Dr. Jack Schaefer, who was my first guest, Chris Voss, who was number 23, Stephen Kotler, like 30 something, like still really early on. And I remember just telling them my story, like, hey, I used to be in radio. I've had 5 or 6 online radio shows before this. I had a blog site. I almost got a show on MTV. I'm already got this, and that. These guests have come on my show. I always shot high from the start. That's another tip. Always shoot high because people are like sheep. They only want to go where it's like hot. And if you have low caliber guests, you're only going to keep getting low caliber guests. So you always want to shoot high. And I would just tell them my story and they would just feel like, all right, like I want to pay it forward. And what happened was a lot of these guests who came on my show back then, now it's like whenever they need any help, they can always come on my show and I give back to them. And I've gotten people like Dr. Jack Schaefer. He was the first guest on my show. My mentor is Jordan Harbinger, who's literally the number 10 podcaster in the world, like on any given day. And I got him a spot on his show and really helped him. And so I think people love to pay it forward when you look like you're somebody who really has put in the work and who has a chance to win. So if you can explain that cohesively in a way that could really tug on people's heartstrings, you have a chance for them to say yes, even though you don't quite deserve it. And so I feel like I was always punching above my weight because I was good at kind of persuading people to come on, even though I didn't have the numbers yet.
That is so beautiful. At the end of each podcast, do you bring up the fact that you have a service that can potentially help them with all their social media, or do you wait for them to ask and you don't usually bring it up?
I never bring it up. Every time I've tried to bring it up, it's blown up in my face. Yeah. And then like it gets so awkward. And so honestly, for the longest time, I never brought it up and it worked great. People, I leave breadcrumbs. right? So our email signatures, everybody in my company has an email signature that says YAP Media, #1 LinkedIn marketing agency, award-winning social and podcast agency, whatever our little accolades are, we have an email signature. So every point of contact, they get a reminder about what my business is. So once they're booked, the reminders, the thank you, the micro content, everybody has an email signature. A lot of the times when we send the cross promo email after the interview, when they're all the videos and stuff, they'll be like, you guys did such a great job. Like, let's talk about social media, and then that's how the conversation starts. Now, a lot of the time, I might mention something in my story organically, or they'll know beforehand, and literally the interview ends and they want to go straight into a discovery call. And they want to talk straight, hey, can you hang on for 30 minutes and talk about your services? And it just goes straight into a discovery call. Anytime, even if it's in their best interest, like there's some people that come on my show and I'm like, you're so rich, you have 0 LinkedIn following, I can literally make you a LinkedIn influencer. And I'll try to say that in the nicest way that I can. It's always too strong. The whole purpose of using your podcast as a lead generation tool is to build trust in an authentic way. And so whenever I bring it up on myself, it becomes immediately inauthentic. Like I had some ulterior motive, even if I didn't. And so that's why I've chosen never to bring it up on my own. If they bring it up, I'm happy to talk about it. And instead I leave breadcrumbs. The other thing that we do now that we have more money to invest in things is I send everybody a box before the interview. Wow. The box has my podcast cover. I send them a mic. I send them a mug with Young and Profiting on it. A thank you card that says what my business is, like a little cards that say what we do. And it's just another touch point that kind of soft sells everything.
Given that you guys probably have a list of guests of people that you really want on your show, let's say there's your dream 100 that you haven't had on your show yet. You've already emailed them all once before. Is there a good way to sort of continually follow up with this list again and again? Because you don't really want to sort of go out of your dream 100 list. You want to sort of keep your podcast at high caliber people, as you've said before. What's the best way to keep following up with people? Is that something you even do? Or what's your thoughts on trying to keep your podcast guests high caliber?
100%. Sometimes I laugh because I'll go into my DMs on LinkedIn. For example, I got Charles Duhigg maybe 4 months ago. I've been trying to get him since 2018, and I can see my messages on LinkedIn of me reaching out when I was a baby podcaster. And then fast forward to today, we ended up getting it through a book publisher, and then they got us Charles Duhigg, So sometimes one thing is if the same approach is not working, for example, I tried doing it on LinkedIn over and over again for years, and then we didn't get Charles Duhigg until we went through his publisher, right? So you don't want to take the same approach and just spam people, but maybe there's something that you're missing in terms of how you can actually get them. So for me, I interview a lot of authors. A lot of the times how we get people now is through their actual publishers. So we'll see what are the books that are coming out. We'll try to make relationships with those publishers. And then they might ask us for favors. Can you have this person on? And we'll give you this person who's really big. And so you start to have a relationship with them. So don't do the same thing over and over again. That's insanity. And by the way, people are going to get turned off. They're going to be like, when are you going to leave me alone? I always I'll refresh my requests if I have something to say. So I might be hey, I just landed the cover of Podcast Magazine. Are you ready to come on my show now? Or hey, I just got #1 in entrepreneurship. Can you do you want to come on my show now? I'm getting, millions of downloads, whatever it is. And I just try to give them some new information, am I big enough for you yet? Are you going to say yes to me yet? Sometimes people think that's cute, and then they'll be yeah, let's do it. Wow, you've really grown, So you kind of have to earn it sometimes. And so show the social proof, I'd say, is the other thing to think about.
Last question, I promise. I think this is my theory on podcasts. As I've been doing over the last 2 years, I definitely don't see it as a financial play. It definitely doesn't, I've been making a loss every single month on my podcast, but I see it as a long-term social proof, you're building all these relationships. It gives you authority within the space, but it's not a money-making sort of machine. Is that true? Have you been using your podcast to build authority?
I used to say that too when I was a small podcaster that wasn't getting a lot of downloads. Podcasting can be extremely lucrative, but you need the downloads. So what do you need for downloads? You need investment, right? You can grow your podcast if you have a budget. It's just like any other platform. If you put paid ads against it, it's going to grow. If you and then once you grow, you're going to get asked to get on bigger shows. And it's like this flywheel effect, right? And so my podcast this year on average brought in $60,000 a month, right? Just the podcast. And I'm a big podcast, but I'm not Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan. I do punch above my weight, like I was saying. I do like other things that allow me to monetize every single download in unique ways. And that includes what I was just saying, also includes like my social and my YouTube. So like the podcast brand on average brought in that much. This is outside of the agency. But the key is, when you're starting a podcast, you want to think about, how can I make money off this podcast that isn't from sponsors? That's number one. Because once you can make money off the podcast, for me, it was my agency. And that took off right away. And I was able to start making a lot of money off of it that I was able to reinvest in growing my show. Once you have a big podcast, it gets very lucrative to have sponsorships, and it's unlimited scalability, because you can have 5 commercials per episode and you get paid based on downloads. So the more downloads that you have, no matter what, the more that you get paid. And not many big podcasters are out there. So all the big shows are sold out because there's not that many podcasters that have an audience, right? And nobody wants to buy ads on a small show. You're not really a contender until you're getting, 20,000 downloads a week, 10,000 downloads a week. And most podcasts are nowhere near that amount. And so it's kind of like the rich get richer, but it is so lucrative to be in that top tier. And really what you need to get there is investment, and you need to be willing to invest in your show. And you need to have a good show that retains people, of course, but anybody can have a big show at this point with the right media buying approach. And you need to understand the ins and outs of the industry. So many podcasters out there, they're only worried about their content, and they don't understand that there's this whole other world about promoting it and getting listeners and monetizing those listeners and understanding your ROI and all that kind of stuff. And I used to be like you. I swear, as little as 2 years ago, I used to say, there's no money. Podcasting is not a business. It's just a lead generation tool for another business. I used to always say that. There's probably recordings of me saying that. And then once I actually got a lot of downloads, I was like, oh, wait, shit, no, there's a lot of money in this. Never mind. I take that back. And I actually learned from Jordan Harbinger, who makes his entire income millions of dollars a year just off his podcast. And he opened my eyes for me to realize, like, oh, wow, like there's some whole other business model that I was ignoring.
You're so freaking amazing, Hala. Where can people find about what you do, hear your product? What are all the places we should send people to?
Thank you. So first of all, I would love for you guys to check out Young and Profiting Podcast. It is my baby. It is, top entrepreneurship business podcast. I've interviewed people like Seth Godin, Robert Greene, Matthew McConaughey, Deepak Chopra, Ed Milet, Jim Quick. So many great names. Such a great show. We interview the brightest minds in the world, and we unpack their wisdom into actionable advice. We talk about productivity, how to gain influence, side hustles, entrepreneurship, all that good stuff. So hopefully you guys check out that show. It's on every platform, Young and Profiting or YAP podcast. Just Google us. Also, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for my name. It's Hala Taha. I'm on Instagram and TikTok at YAP with Hala. I'm on YouTube now. You can search Young and Profiting, and that's about it. Just Google us. You can't miss us.
Thank you so much, Hala. I really appreciate your time today. I love how passionate you are about podcasts. Your shit. LinkedIn, I've asked so many questions, and I can tell you just given everything away. You don't hold things back. You love providing as much value as possible. You have the same funny bone where you don't really want to I have this weird thing where it's just hard for me to sell. I want to just give everything away, and I can definitely sense that from you. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Andy. I really enjoyed this, and you did a great job, and I'm really looking forward to see you grow in this space.
Thank you very much, Hala. So that is another episode of the podcast. Hope you guys got value today. If you guys made it this far, please let me know. Please drop comments below. Leave me a review on Spotify, iTunes. I'm going to be reading them at the end of each episode. So thank you so much for your time if you made it this far. And I'll see you guys next week with another episode. Peace.